Okay, so we're going to start our discussion about Rogue One. We just watched it together. At the very beginning of the movie, there's that loud note. And it starts off right away with Krennic Shuttle.
Yes.
And it's a very striking opening, I thought.
Well, especially because you're, like we said, you're waiting for words first. You're not actually expecting action right away, and you don't get that.
Yeah, and I thought the music was.
Mm.
I liked the music a lot. I thought it was very well done. But it's not John Williams.
No, you can tell actually. I did notice a big difference with the music in this movie than compared to the other ones. It seems like there's more of it, and it can be a lot more dramatic too.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with oh my gosh, what's the guy's name who raised her?
Saw Gerrera.
Yes, with scenes with him were like extra dramatic.
Right, like almost disturbing, with like how he walked and stuff, and the music was like almost spooky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's that sense of unease around him.
Yeah, because he was so unusual, like inhuman,
Mm-hmm.
with all of his like robotic additions, and then also the way he speaks and the way he moves and everything. Yeah,
And you could tell his thinking was kind of off.
yeah,
Like he was paranoid and very distrustful of people.
yeah,
And he had a poor relationship with the other rebel leaders, which kind of makes you wonder, like,
Mm-hmm.
what did he do to them?
Mm-hmm. Well,
well,
I feel like it's they just didn't trust him. I mean, obviously they didn't trust him because he didn't trust anyone, so
Right.
he was off a little bit. But going back to the beginning of the movie, what do you guys think of that opening scene where her mom runs out and then
with the towel
yes,
or whatever,
right.
hiding the gun. I thought that was pretty bold. I think that was intending to set the tone.
Mm-hmm.
That it was not your father's Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where it wasn't like this gentle family movie. Like, your mom will get shot.
Yeah.
Like, it's hardcore. For her to pull out the gun, and she didn't even say she was about to shoot or anything. And his name's Director Krennic.
Yeah.
Just has her shot. And she shoots him in the shoulder as, like, a result of getting shot.
Right.
But it was just, like, it was pretty bold to start. It was setting the tone, like, this is hardcore.
I like how it made the Empire's evil very tangible.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, they're going to come to your house, they're going to steal your family away, whatever. And it felt very personal. Like when you see a Star Destroyer over Jeddah City, you get the sense of intimidation and whatever. But that, if they opened on that and said, okay, let's show, what's going on there, it wouldn't feel like this is a family being personally attacked or,
Right. Yeah.
So it brings the scale down to this is a terrible thing to happen to a person and a family.
Right. And to the point where they're on this planet, excommunicated practically, like totally alone, self-sufficient, not imposing on anyone.
Right.
And they're like going out of their way to come after them. Like almost like, even though he has ties with the Empire, it's almost like no one is safe.
Right, definitely.
You see this really sharp objectification happening, and you see it throughout, but it's really clear, I think, just in that opening scene. Like, it really does, like you said, set the tone for how evil the Empire is, and the fact that people are diminished. It's total reification. People are diminished to nothing more than objects, and their worth is based off of what these people can do
Right.
in exchange for, whatever work they can do. But there's no value in human life whatsoever. And you get that sense in that opening scene, especially when he says there's a child, get it.
I noticed that too.
And he knew the child was female because he's seen Jin
Mm-hmm.
as a baby when they were still on that with Director Krennic before
Right.
they had ran away.
Well, and there's a very quick moment in sort of like a dream or a flashback sequence when Galen says to Jen, "Oh, you look afraid. or something when Krennic was visiting them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So she was uneasy around him, and anyway, it's kind of set up that there's something odd going on with him, that a kid would be afraid, and then he's disdainful of her. And I also thought it was interesting how at the beginning he's kind of coming down into this peaceful grassy planet. There's not much going on, and he has this big imposing black shuttle and his death troopers, not just the normal stormtroopers, but his elite squad, to come get this basically defenseless family.
Well, I guess in a sense that gives you an idea that they're maybe not as defenseless as they seem to be. I mean, obviously they were defenseless, but there's some sort of hidden power, I feel like, that the Empire is scared of. And I mean, it could come down to the Force, it could come down to just that general union of people and the power of people coming together, with the rebellion. I mean, I don't think that they fully understand what kind of power that is. So every time they come up against it, they hit it as hard as they can.
Yeah, I agree. They're sort of excessively brutal, just as a matter of course.
Mm-hmm.
So after that scene, if we're ready to kind of move on, we have the scene on the asteroid city.
Right.
And Cassian is trying to extract that agent, but he ends up killing him, which is pretty shocking, I thought.
Yeah, I will never forget that scene. It's just the last thing that I expected him to do. 100% did not see that coming, and I'm sure the other guy did not see it coming either.
Right.
Yeah.
Was it necessary?
Okay, so I honestly didn't understand the dialogue the first time I saw the movie, but it's sort of a detail, but the agent he's talking to has his arm in a cast,
Yeah.
or in a sling or something.
Mm-hmm.
And Cassian says something about okay, we got to get out of here, because the troopers start closing off the alleyway and kind of moving in.
Okay.
And the guy says, I can't climb out of here with my arm.
Yeah.
Yeah, why would you do that? I can't get out of here. I have my arm.
Right.
Okay.
So I think Cassian's like, oh, you're right about that. You can't escape.
Well, because he knew that the guy obviously wasn't emotionally hardened. He was very frantic and
Right.
afraid and cautious and paranoid, and he was already vulnerable being in a cast, and he knew probably if this guy who had information and who was passing it this top secret information of a defector and whatever they had, he knew that if the stormtroopers got him and got to the point where they were going to torture him, he would give up all this information. He was probably think that this guy can't get away and he's going to give stuff away.
Right. It makes sense from a very cold perspective.
Yeah. Which is just, in that way too, that sets the tone for that character, that he's just he's a killer, and yeah, he's not Empire, but he's still, he's still a assassin.
Not just
Yeah.
the character even though, but for the rebellion, because I think up until this movie, everyone has viewed the rebellion and Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia as that side, they're the good guys. They don't play that way. They don't play dirty.
Right.
But clearly, how could they have possibly gotten where they've gotten without playing dirty? Sometimes, I mean, there are the sacrifices, like he said, there are things that we do. I follow orders. There's sacrifices that you make to get things done. Otherwise, we wouldn't get anything done.
Right, when they get that band of people to join Jin, when they're going to that planet.
Scarif, you mean, at
Yeah.
the end?
All of those people, he was speaking for them, saying that they're all saboteurs or assassins or spies, and they all did that for the rebellion. Thus saying that the rebellion isn't some martyr class, totally good, never did anything bad, never hurt anyone innocent.
But I really like this movie for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I almost think they don't want to sully the Skywalker family and, the main characters of Star Wars. So it's kind of we have to acknowledge that this happens, but we don't want to besmirch our heroes. So these other folks sometimes, resort to these dirty tactics and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I think we see Jeddah City and the pilot
And the pilot.
defecting. There's the fallen statue. I think it's
Yeah.
a Jedi statue. That's kind of an interesting visual.
Yeah, showing that like the time of the Jedi has passed.
I wish in earlier movies, like episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, when the Jedi were in power and they were very present, that we had seen more of those places. And that we had, like, as an audience who hasn't read the books, who doesn't know the whole history of the Jedi, that we had gotten some of that.
To
Right.
see like
Before
the
seeing
statue
this.
while it was
Yes.
erect before it had fallen.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a missed opportunity
Mm-hmm.
for the prequels. Because the prequels really showed Coruscant as the Jedi temple, and like that's their only real facility that they had. But clearly that's not the case.
Right. It seems that the Jedi were in many ways an ancient civilization almost,
Mm-hmm.
or like an ancient sort of religious belief
Yeah.
system all into
Right.
themselves, but we don't get any information on that, and not anything before, you know, Yoda. I mean, we don't even really know how Yoda became to be Yoda or anything like
Yeah.
that. I think it's a shame. I'm interested in the history.
Yeah, I wonder if they'll ever do prequels. I don't know if that's necessary, but maybe.
Right, why not? Why not? But I do like too that this what makes this one so unique is that it's not a Jedi film.
Right.
Not like the other ones.
None of the
Oh, that
protagonists.
reminds me of something I wanted to mention to you guys. This might sound silly, but I think the power level, if you will, of the characters, of all of our main characters, is like 7 out of 10.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like Luke Skywalker, Yoda, Darth Vader, Emperor Palpatine, those are 10 out of 10 among the most powerful people in the galaxy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jyn Erso, you'd say she's above average in many ways. She's intelligent, she's tough, but she's not superhuman.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think the same goes for Cassian, Chirrut, and Baze, and Bodhi, and everyone, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
And the same goes for Director Krennic, too.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of like middle to upper level Imperial, but he's not at the top.
Yeah, he's
And
not
everyone
like
likes
a-
to remind him of that.
Yeah.
Oh yes, they do.
Because he even went down with that one shot, like, at the end. And, like, when I was watching it the first time, and I all kind of forgot, so when we were just watching it, I was thinking, like, oh, he, like, keeled over, but he's playing dead. Like, he's gonna shoot him. He's gonna, like, turn and, like, try and shoot someone.
Yeah.
But no, he just died.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he was just lame.
Yeah, well, he's just an average person.
Right.
Despite his cape and his white uniform.
Yeah,
Which-
despite the show.
Yes. He's a little bit of a peacock, I think.
Oh
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. And it doesn't. I don't know why.
For his
because
insecurity.
It really though. I think that that's all that it could be because he is very low on the social ladder. He's very low.
Speaking on Jeddah, I loved at that city with the last holy temple, the contrast between all of the people and the costumes. Because you had the white stormtroopers, then you had like all the people and the robots, and then you had the people wearing the red hooded capes wrapped almost like hijab. And then you had the robots wearing like the like full on like I forget what it's called, like it's a burqa or like the full on cover like with only their eyes are showing. And it was just
Yeah.
it was so like it was an interesting like look with like the red, the contrast of colors,
Mhm.
and then it was an interesting parallel.
Mm-hmm.
Like it
Yeah.
made me wonder like what is like is it just protection from sand? Like what is this cultural tie to bring that? But it's so, irrelevant now because it's all gone.
Right.
But it was just interesting to see. I was like, is this relevant to because they're at the city with like the last holy temple
Right.
that like there's like religious tie to it, or I don't know.
I think that's kind of what they were suggesting.
Yeah, like the last like religious city.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they have like the people, like wearing the things. Like who knows? Maybe they like have this like connection to the Force, or
Mhm.
I don't know.
I think it makes sense that they showed all that and didn't spend a lot of time explaining it
Right,
because it's kind of nice to leave that to the imagination.
right,
But I think the visual does convey diversity and religiosity and,
right.
Well, I think the red was important too for, even as simple as pointing to the audience that these are the civilians and they are not on either side here.
Mm.
That they just want to keep their own safe. And
Yeah.
because they're in red, it does catch your eye that they're just in the middle of this fight that they're not involved in at all. It has nothing to do with them.
Between the rebellion, the Empire, and his militia or whatever, militant group. My favorite character lives in Jeddah. What's his name?
Chirrut or Base?
With the staff.
Yeah, Chirrut.
Yeah. He's the best.
He's very interesting, and I wonder if the Jedi were still around, if he would have been a Jedi. Because clearly he understands the Force.
Probably more than like Maz Kanata from Force Awakens.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like she was aware of it in some way, but we didn't see her act on that or, influence her surroundings. Whereas I think Chirrut maybe didn't like do a force push or pull or anything, but he got away with some pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think it was almost like the fact that he didn't do any of those moves, like, I'm glad, because it was showing in a way that, like, you don't have to be a Jedi to be as connected to the Force as a Jedi is.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you can't use, like, Force abilities, but you can still, like, read the Force just as much. And it was obviously that when someone doesn't have a primary sense, they rely on other senses. And someone who is religious and blind with, like, the Force, he's more tied into it because he depends on it more for everything.
Right. And the Force is interesting because it's not presented as, like, a belief system alone. It's a belief system that's based in a measurable reality, sort of. So
like a life force, all living things, whatever.
Right. Rebels were holding out in one of those temples, the old abandoned temples, and it was, I thought, kind of like, even though the Jedi are gone, there's someone who represents good still. Mm-hmm. Even though Saw Gerrera isn't a perfect guy.
What did you guys think of Jyn and Cassian starting at Jeddah?
Okay, I gotta just say, I love Jyn as a character so much. I think I like her more than Rey.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. It's because Rey hasn't been able to develop fully. Mm-hmm. She got the first third of her story and her character development, so that's fine. But I think Jyn is so great because she does develop. And we actually get to see her as a young kid, too. Which, she's not really a detailed character in that stage of life, but at least we're somewhat exposed to her. Mm-hmm. So I like her roughness and her kind of... She truly has a rebellious attitude towards authority. And she doesn't particularly care if it's the Empire's authority or the Rebel Alliance or Saw or whoever. She has no interest in that. At first.
Yeah. I love Jyn. And I think Rogue One was like the only true feminist movie out of Star Wars. Because you could cast Jyn's character, keep everything the same, and cast it as a man, and it would be no different. As opposed to Episode 7 with Rey, there's many times where Rey's character behaved differently, like in accordance to man, or the male characters behaved differently because Rey was a female. It was like, it was like points of topic during conversation in that movie. And with this movie, and I was paying attention to it because I was curious, there was never once any time she had to prove herself based on her gender, or she used her gender, or anyone treated her differently based on the gender. Like, you could have made Jyn a man, and everything could have been exactly the same. And even at the end, Cassian and Jyn, as both men, could have like embraced each other and both died together.
Right, and it wasn't a sexual thing.
It could have been sexual or not. It could have been camaraderie. Either way, it would have worked.
Yeah.
But I love how they did this one.
I really like Jyn's costume, too. It does not sexualize her. It's very practical. The stuff she wears has a lot of pockets. She wears a holster for her pistol. She's not trying to impress anyone. Like, we talked about how Rey had kind of this impractical outfit for being out in the sands. But Jyn seems very utilitarian.
I'm not fully convinced. I paid close attention and I thought the same thing. Mm-hmm. But there are moments where there is I really feel like, and I felt it the first time I saw it, and I saw that watching it again, I feel the same way, that there is a sort of chemistry between her and Cassian. And I don't know if that could still be there if it were cast a man. I'm sure that it could be. But just from my own personal perspective, she had smudged, smoky eyes the whole movie.
Yeah.
She had the perfect peachy lips the whole movie. Her hair never once looked dirty, and it stayed in that bun the entire time.
Those are good points.
She was
That's,
wearing
you know,
fitted, high-waisted pants, very stylish, I must say, and a cropped jacket that accented her hourglass figure. None of the male characters had anything like that. I know it doesn't look directly feminine, but that was very feminine compared to them.
It wasn't a flowing thing like
It
Rey.
wasn't like
it
a
wasn't
flowing robe.
right.
It could have been maybe a dress, maybe not.
Yeah, it wasn't as blatant. It was more subtle, but yeah, it was.
But it was
more,
still there.
yeah,
Mhm.
still feminine.
Which is
in a way.
fine because like we're saying this is a woman, like this is a
Yeah.
female character. We're not trying to hide that.
Right.
And that's okay. I'm just not sure that I don't know.
It's hard. I feel like it's hard to say because I was looking at that too, and I noticed that too. Like, even though she was a little bit more scuffed up, she was a little bit less like innocent and pure looking than Rey. Like in the first scene with her, she was like angry looking. She was scuffed up. She had like mascara and a smoky eye. She looked hardened.
Mm.
Yeah.
And
Well, you have to think too. She's older than Rey. Rey is very young
how old
in
is
her
Rey?
first movie. I'm assuming Rey is in her teens,
I thought she was like 16 to 18.
and I feel
yeah,
like
I don't know exactly.
and I feel like she's much older because
She's 20 something.
her
She's
last
25
encounter with Sol Guerrero, she was 16
Yeah.
when he abandoned her.
That's true.
And she made that seem like that was a long time ago for her. So she's
Right. She's
It's probably been
She's-
like 5 years.
she's
or at least.
older, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that makes a big difference too with character development.
Mhm.
And I don't like how little dialogue she has compared to all the other characters. She talks very little in this movie.
Yeah, even though she's like the face
Mhm.
of the movie.
I would have liked for her to have more dialogue too.
Yeah, but I did think there was chemistry. There were moments where Cassian looked at Jin as she, took out the stormtroopers, and he was kind of like thrown off and kind of impressed.
Yeah.
Like that cliche thing where the guy looks at the girl, he's like, "I'm gonna protect you," and then she like takes him out, and he's like, "Oh, you don't need protection." Wow,
Yeah,
that's
that's
kinda
true.
Cool.
That's another question that I do have actually, and that was specifically for Jeddah. Why does he feel compelled to save her?
He had like this pull like where he wouldn't protect anyone. He was only for himself. He even told K2 that whatever. But I don't know. I was thinking, is this because she's like a cute girl? Or is it like she's affected him somehow? Like he's like kind of like almost like, I guess like their cliche way of explaining it maybe would be like that he's more like she's renewing his hope somehow. Because it's like Star Wars, like hope is a big.
But
Big
isn't
deal for
it?
them.
But wouldn't it be the opposite? Because he was the one that told her that it was
Mhm.
about hope, and she was all,
I think
Yeah, okay.
maybe when she saved that child, it was like a big, like he saw that and he was like shocked. And before that, he wasn't really protecting her. But as soon as she saved like that
Well, that
child,
was their first thing together, though.
Right.
He had no reason to protect her before that.
right? But after that, then maybe that's why, because he
And
was
then-
like kind of impressed and thrown off. Like everyone's for themselves, and then she's like putting her life on the line for a random child. I don't know. Try to make sense of it.
I think they kind of earned each other's respect over time. She was very cynical about the rebels.
Mm-hmm.
He was very cynical about who's this girl. I don't really care about her. I don't like this necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
And then they survived together, and they more or less kind of completed their mission together. I guess it didn't go that well, but
Mm-hmm.
so they kind of built mutual respect. That's how I saw it, at least.
Well, I can understand by the end of the movie, but I feel that maybe it happens very quickly. Because there's so much early story. And then it's like you're halfway through the movie, and this is their first mission together, their first part of their mission, and he's already willing to give up everything and save her life. When up until that point, it seemed like he was all for himself. Or if he was just about the rebellion. So why all of a sudden do you care?
It's just an accelerated story, because it's
Yeah.
all open and close in one movie.
Mm-hmm.
And with Star Wars, we're used to 3 movies
Mhm.
length, that it just throws it off. That we're expecting this like slow progress, like we see
Right.
with like Episode 7, where like, you know, Finn is still like, you know, unsure, Rey is still unsure, everyone's still like kind of inexperienced and not quite sure of the future. And with Jin and Cassian, it's like they find the first third of the movie is like their first movie almost.
I think Episode 7 has a beginning, middle, and end. And Rogue One has a beginning, middle, and end in the first act, a beginning, middle, and end in the second act, and a beginning, middle, and end in the third act. Because there's 3 missions, you know, there's Jeddah, Edu, and then Scarif.
Mhm.
And each mission is sort of built up, takes place, and then you see the aftermath, or, you know, did they win or lose, or what happened.
Mhm.
So the pacing is different in that way, and I think there's a little bit of character development that's kind of, I don't want to say skipped, but it moves so fast that there's not much time given to that. It's almost like their actions are supposed to speak for the nature of the relationship or the status of their closeness or whatever, without much dialogue being exchanged.
Mhm. It seems like a lot of the if any development that occurs is just assumed to be internal,
Right.
which is fine. I can totally understand that. I wish there were more female characters, to be honest.
I really liked the 2 female pilots who
Yes.
didn't get to say or do much, but I just like that
But they were
or
there.
actually maybe there were even like 3 or 4, but there were at least a couple for sure.
Mhm.
And of course the, you know, rebellion is diverse and it has women in it, so it makes sense to show that.
Mhm.
So the other thing I wanted to talk about with Jeddah is the destruction of Jeddah City,
Mhm.
which takes place in about 1 second. The entire city is totally vaporized. And the first time I saw that, my jaw dropped, and I was like, wow, that's amazing, that's terrible kind of moment. And the way that it's shown is so fast that I think it's almost it's shown as a tragic, horrible thing rather than a cool thing. It's not like, oh wow, the city's exploding, wow, that's so visually interesting. Like when Krennic says, oh, it's beautiful, that's because he's so far away and he's so far removed. When you see the city in a snap vaporized, it's not a beautiful thing. It's like, wow, that's horrible.
Right. It's not like that cliche like you see like this building gets destroyed, then this person's running through and they get blasted. You know, it's just like boom, it's all done.
No, that's one thing I will say that makes this movie so important, I think, to the whole series, is that, again, you see how awful and destructive the Empire really is. And I don't think that, I mean, definitely if you were coming into Star Wars from Episode 4, you don't really have a clear idea. You know that the Empire is bad because you're told that it's bad, and you know that the Jedi are gone, but other than that, you don't really see, and even with Episode 1, 2, and 3, again, you don't really see this kind of awful destruction and terror and destroying of whole cities and whole planets. You see corruption, yeah, you see dictatorship, yeah, you see all of that coming into play, but you don't see this. You don't see death, you don't see destruction.
Right, and I think in Episode 4 you have Alderaan destroyed,
Mhm.
and in Episode 7 you have the Hosnian system destroyed.
Mhm.
We never see Alderaan up close in a meaningful way that I can remember, and we don't really see the Hosnian system up close. We're told, oh, that's the capital.
Yeah, you just see
So-
like a quick 3 seconds of like 4 faces.
Right, and Jeddah City, which is probably not that populous compared to those planets,
Mhm.
has a personality and it has different cultures, and you kind of care about it and you get an idea of like, oh, this is an interesting, unusual place.
Mhm.
And then boom, it's gone, and it's emotional, you know, you feel something when that whole city's destroyed. But that really speaks to the strength of this movie for conveying that emotion and sense of loss and destruction, whereas you have whole planets blown away and everyone's like, oh, that's pretty bad, right?
Right, that's too bad, yeah.
It kind of felt like interesting commentary almost, and maybe I'm just like looking for it. But with Jeddah in its like desert setting, with its like some of its people wearing like the hijab and all that stuff, and then these people from a faraway land just bombing civilians. To me, I think about it more in that way, but it seemed like a parallel to stuff going on now. And maybe if that was like a thought for the creators and like the director, it's like a thought to kind of like sensitize that, like, think about people.
I will say this movie made me think about real life war and conflict and genocide and whatnot more than any other Star Wars movie has.
Yeah.
Because it feels more real. And like you said, that's a combination of familiar, kind of concrete items, like looking at the clothing or looking at the architecture or the climate or whatever. It definitely reminds you of real life places.
Yeah.
Do we want to move on to the next section of the movie then? Or?
Sure.
So the research outpost on Edu, it's interesting to me because you have the stormy atmosphere and then you have the kind of mountainous, rugged terrain, and then you have the Imperial base up there, and it looks like it fits. It looks like this is where the Empire belongs, at least to me. When you see the Star Destroyer over Jeddah City, it's like, oh, that's so out of place, it's so strange. And when you see the Imperial storage facility or the data storage facility on Scarif, it's like, oh, this is out of place. That huge black tower on these beautiful beaches, it looks terrible, right? So I almost thought visually it's saying this is where the Empire belongs. This is a terrible thing, it belongs in a terrible, stormy, desolate place.
Well, actually, my first thought, the first time I saw the movie for that scene, was the Clone Wars and the site where they built the clone army. It had the same stormy, rainy atmosphere.
Oh, that's interesting. That's Camino.
That was my first thought, but I know what you mean. It did definitely seem like a good home for the Empire. Not very convenient.
No, it's it's not very practical.
Yeah, with the stormtroopers standing right at the edge of the rainy, edge of the terrace or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, the
and he just
landing platform.
To the point where someone takes his gun and he just falls off.
Right.
It's slippery up there.
Long way down. One thing that I thought was interesting is how, we've seen Imperial officers summarily execute people under them. When Krennic does it, he doesn't even know who's a traitor, who's leaking information. Then when he does know, he doesn't care. And I thought that kind of addressed his character.
Right.
He wanted to demonstrate his power. He didn't really care. Who's guilty, who's innocent. These people are brilliant researchers and engineers. Just kill them all. He was so arrogant and so confident, like, oh, we're done with the research project, kill everyone.
Right. They're still workers.
They all look
Right.
the same too. Did you notice that?
The scientists?
Like, not only because of their uniforms, but they were all old white men. Every single one of them.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of interesting because that's who the Empire values. If you're looking at it racially, that's who they respect or value. But the joke's on them, because no one has value unless you're producing something for the Empire. And then I thought the battle on Edu was kind of interesting, how the rebels, sent in the bombers. Okay, plan A didn't work out, let's just bomb it and be done with it.
Right.
It showed that, not to the same extent as the Empire, obviously, but they were a little bit willing to take extreme solutions too.
Right, because it just showed that, they were in a war, and in a war, to be, sensitive about some guy who they don't know well, who is building the Death Star,
Right.
it's impractical, and it would be unreasonable, from their perspective, to be should we not kill this guy? They don't know they finished a Death Star. They're like, we have to kill him before he finishes it, or whatever.
Right.
So, it makes sense.
Why didn't Cassian shoot?
A cute girl told him not to.
I thought there were two reasons.
Okay.
One was he didn't have a good shot right away. So that caused a legitimate reason to hesitate. And once he had that hesitation and lost the momentum, then he kind of had to take aim again and go through the whole thing. And I think it was painful for him to have to do that. If he could have gone up there, perfect shot, okay, bang. It would have been quick and easy and painless. But since he had to aim, oh no, this is in the way, no, the guy's moving, gotta aim again, let me line it up again. he had too much time to think about it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh god, I really have to kill this guy. It wasn't just line up and pull the trigger, you know?
Right.
And then the second thing, I think he was trying to figure out what was going on with Krennic and the engineers and Urso. Because he could kind of tell that something was going on, and I think he wanted to discern, like, is this a good time to attack, or should I, like, watch the meeting take place, or... That's what I took from it.
Right. Well, you could also tell, like, even though he was an assassin, that he was not unfeeling. Because even when he killed that one guy, his, like, kind of informant, the guy with the arm in the sling.
Yeah.
After he shot the guy, like, he stood there, he looked like he was almost, like, out of it. And he stood there for, like, a few seconds, like, almost, like, kind of shocked at what he did. And then
Right.
he was like, okay, gotta climb. It shows that he's not like, oh, shoot him, okay, let's go. Like, as if, you know, not to be parallel with, like, Krennic, who just, like, has
Right.
people killed and walks away. Like, Krennic was, like, you know, having dinners and stuff with the Urso family, including the mom, and then he has her killed like nothing. So...
Well, he has her killed. He himself didn't shoot, did he?
Well, no.
No, but he
But-
said do it.
He said shoot her,
Yeah.
do it or whatever. So he has,
Right.
he essentially in a way pulled the trigger. Because they
I don't
wouldn't
know.
have.
I don't know if I would say that that's the same thing. I
Right.
think he's a bit of a coward.
Oh, definitely.
He likes to give orders, and he likes the appearance of command and bravery. But I don't know, yeah, he's...
I mean,
You
of course,
can't mess
yeah.
up that pretty white cape.
No.
No.
And I just want to say it is a pretty white cape. I actually really like the costume design on that. I thought it was pretty interesting.
It's very regal.
Yes.
But yeah, so with that, you know, Cassian does have a conscience, and even though he's an assassin, like, maybe he was feeling guilty because he was not only going to assassin this person who is, like, his comrade's father, but also, like, he was lying about it the whole time. And he's starting
Yeah.
to feel like, after having to pause on the kill for so long, he was feeling second thoughts. It was sad, too, when Jin's father died, and his, like, final words were, I have so much to tell you, and then he died. That made it, like, 10 times sadder for me. Because usually, like, in those scenes with the parent dying, it's like, you know, I can rest easy now, knowing you're
Right.
okay, or, you know, something cliche like that, like, I'm at peace. And her father's last words are, I have so much I want to tell you, and then he dies and he never gets to tell her.
I think there was so much that he could have told her, both, you know, personal stories and his thoughts and feelings, but also, okay, here's the flaw in the Death Star, here's the flaw in the Star Destroyers, here's the flaw in this, the Empire's deployment in this, and this system, or such and such. You know, he probably was able to figure out all sorts of tactical data being in that position. So he only got that one bit out.
I don't know how he managed. Why was that his only choice? Oh, to build the Death Star. I guess because they said in the movie that if he didn't do it, that they would figure it out anyways.
Right.
Right. So I think they were suggesting, well, obviously he definitely put in that one flaw, the fatal flaw in the design, but maybe he was kind of like dragging out the project or sabotaging it in other ways from within.
Right.
He would
Delay-
rather be involved and influence it in some way than not be involved at all.
Right, because if he wasn't involved, then they would just kill him. And if he was involved, then he could sabotage it, because if he wasn't, the person who replaced him probably wouldn't sabotage it.
That was a wise plot point, I will say. That's a solid plot point.
Yeah.
So then after Iadu, they, I think, go back to Yavin 4, and they discuss whether they want to attack Scarif or not. And the rebel leaders are such cowards, and they're so conservative with their discussion there. I guess they didn't have much reason to trust Jin, and they were skeptical, and, you know, those are their people that they would be putting into battle, and they don't want to be responsible for people's deaths and whatnot.
But what have they been doing up till that point? Like, what's the rebellion been? What is the rebellion if it's not going into battle and not putting people in danger for the cause?
Right, and there was a line about how they just assembled a fleet, and they had just done this, to give up immediately, you know. I think some of the leaders were supposed to be political leaders more than military leaders, so maybe they were thinking about, like, this would look bad.
Well, we know that Leia's dad is in the Senate,
Right.
so that's definitely true. And so is that other woman,
Right.
senator.
Mon Mothma.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a couple of the other people who we see are supposed to be senators too, although I'm not completely sure.
I wonder if their position in the rebellion is very similar to the audience's position before seeing this movie, where the amount and level of destruction and terrorization that the Empire is capable of is just not within their comprehension at all. And to them, it still is this political corruption. Like,
Right.
oh, we need to get into the Senate and we need to pass laws, we need to take control there. That's where the real problem is,
Right.
and not on the battlefield.
I think you're probably right about that, because if we look at episode 3, Palpatine was taking too much power and over militarizing and, all that. And those sorts of issues are something that maybe they wanted to address differently than saying that they have this Death Star and they're willing to massacre huge numbers of people. That needs a military solution.
Well, also, when the Empire destroyed Jeddah, they put it out that it was a mining disaster.
Right, they're still trying to cover up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, maybe a lot of the populace wasn't aware of what was really going on.
Well, I guess if you consider that it's the galaxy, that's a huge span. I mean, granted, they have the technology to get from planet to planet, but that's a huge span of space.
Yes.
For these communications, I mean, things get lost. I mean, clearly Jeddah wasn't like a hugely populated city.
Right.
That it would be the first thing on the radar for them to hear about back at the capital, that, it was destroyed. They just, it's not that important. So if they're on the outskirts of the galaxy, I guess that makes sense.
So then once they do the attack on Scarif, I really like how there's the shuttle coming down through the shield gate. That reminds me a lot of episode 6, where there's the shuttle landing on the Imperial platform. And the Scarif stuff is really fast-paced and exciting. I like the space battle, and I think that's probably the best space battle in Star Wars.
Honestly, the last 15 to 20 minutes of the movie is my favorite part of the movie. That whole scene on Scarif, yeah.
Yeah, it was so intense and exciting and suspenseful, and you feel horrible and excited because, the people you're coming to like are dying. And not just, one cliche, everyone.
I just feel that the whole movie leads you up to that point. Because it takes you so long. It feels like such a long journey for you to realize this is why we're here. We're here to get the plans, and this is what leads us to, this is how Star Wars began, right here. This is it. Okay, this is exciting. Now I need to see how this happened.
Yeah, it's very attached, obviously, to episode 4 at that point. I think, the stuff on Jeddah and Edu is sort of more about Jin and more about setting the stage, and then Scarif is, really Star Wars.
Yeah. And it was, the setting was so beautiful. To watch the battle and, those beachy, waters and the sand and the trees, everything was so pretty. So it was, interesting contrast with, all this violence.
Yeah.
But it was visually very appealing.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to look at those interesting backdrops. They had a AT-AT Walker too, and they had some of the classic designs, but they also had the different TIE fighters. So that was kind of cool. And they had the shore troopers instead of just the normal stormtroopers. So I kind of like how they added a few things here and there without totally changing it. I really like the Mon Calamari Admiral guy. I said that he died.
Yeah.
And then Darth Vader's scene.
That was intense.
It's terrible. It's so intense. Slicing people apart. And
cutting them in the stomach as he hangs them on the ceiling.
Yeah, it's pretty graphic.
I'm really glad that they did it that way, though.
At this time, Vader is at his most evil. Because I think during the prequels, it's he's a tragic, troubled guy who's growing up, and well, no, right? I mean, it's somewhat sympathetic.
Yes, Anakin Skywalker had a real attitude problem.
And I think everyone remembers in episode 6 when he's about to die, and he sort of redeems himself by killing the Emperor, and he has that moment of clarity, and he connects with Luke, and all is forgiven, more or less, right?
Right.
they wanted to make an extreme contrast to that.
No, you never see that sort of display of his power,
Right.
which is really cool to see.
It is really cool to see. Yes. I mean, that's what this is all about, right? Is the Jedi.
I like that it kind of feels like, okay, the Emperor has a good reason for keeping this guy around.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can have your 2 Star Destroyers and however many TIE Fighters and whatever, and the Rebels are sort of winning, but then Vader shows up and it's all over.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was interesting too, I was glad that we didn't get to see the Emperor.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I really appreciate that character, he's so evil and he's mysterious and everything, when we're watching a film where everyone's a 7 out of 10, you know, these people don't get to see the Emperor.
Yeah.
Krennic isn't worthy of the Emperor. Jyn and Cassian, they're not worthy of the Emperor's attention. So it kind of shows, like, don't you imagine the Emperor sort of sneering, like, whatever, we lost Scarif Base, I don't care.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
he sends someone else to deal with it. He's not interested.
Well, again, those places are really, I'm assuming, on the outskirts of the galaxy. So, yeah, they're not important. They are low priority. And what does he care? The Death Star was made. That's all that he cared about.
Yeah.
I thought it was really cool when they handed, like, Leia the data, and it made the next movie, like, episode 4. It made episode 4 seem, like, even more epic, like, starting out, like, that it came from that giant battle.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, like, seeing it on its own, it's like, here's your wall of text. A rogue got the data and gave it to Leia. And it's like C-3PO is like, oh man. It's just, you know, it's like kind of lame, and she like fires a couple shots and gets captured.
Right.
But like up to that point, like that epic battle that like got it to that point,
Yeah.
it makes it like have so much more value.
Yeah, I think if we were to watch Rogue One and then Episode 4 would start off as like the middle of a story. It wouldn't feel like, oh, this is starting a new story. It'd be like, no, this is a continuation, and this is the middle part of the story, and then the end of Episode 4 is a great climax.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it really leads in very nicely, and it sort of makes it more exciting.
Yeah. I like that there wasn't like a ending with a kiss or anything like that. Like I said, it was like more just like comrades in arms.
I
Right.
did find it strange that she was limping at the end, but she was carrying him while they were walking.
He was injured too, yeah.
I know, it's amazing how he made it up from there. Just in time.
Convenient.
It's very convenient.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm not knocking the movie at all. I really like the Star Wars movies. I really like this movie.
Yeah.
I do. But I have to play devil's advocate with these things because they do bother me a little bit.
Oh, I agree with you. There's definitely some cliches and some,
Convenience.
yeah.
Like the tower ladder that she managed to climb in 10 minutes
Oh,
Right. That was
Just in time.
that was silly.
to speak to her father before he died. And then right before she gets shot, Cassian makes it up the ladder too in about the same amount of time that she did. Shocking. And, you know, is able to save the day again.
I will say it was because Krennic was going on and on with his speech. And, well, I don't know, maybe he wasn't going on that much, but the fact that he didn't just shoot her.
Mm.
He was kind of like,
Monologuing.
yeah, he was monologuing a bit, and she was kind of, you know, she said, oh, you know who I am.
Mhm.
And, you know, they were having a little back and forth instead of him going,
And yeah, I was surprised he was like, who are you? Like, what I was
Since when
thinking
do
that.
you care?
Why do you care about who people are? But then, I don't know. Because it's like, why would you care? She's just some rebel
yeah.
who's trying to get your
All of a
plans.
sudden you care.
It's like, oh, she's pretty.
And
Who
then
is
and
she?
then you know who I am. And
It was a nice little burn. You've lost.
and
'Cause
then
her-
now
both
he's
her parents are
dead
like,
and
you'll
she
never
wants
win.
to attack the body and Cassian doesn't let her.
I didn't understand that. I guess he was thinking, like, let's get out of here. It's time to pull out. Don't worry about, you know.
Because they're thinking about getting away at that point. It was
Yeah.
before the explosion.
Yeah, but they have a little moment there though.
If I were
She kinda
Cassian, I
leans
would have
into
said,
him.
go ahead and shoot him.
I know, I would have been like, go ahead, kick him.
If
Throw
you-
him off. We're
yeah.
dying anyways.
If you need
Do what
to
you wanna
release
do.
your anger on him, you know, whatever. I wouldn't blame her for that.
He killed her father and her mother.
Yeah, so I think it makes sense that she was pretty enraged at that moment.
And Sol Guerrero, who was, in a way, some form of, like, parental figure.
Right.
There was something about the death of Sol Guerrero that I felt bothered by, and I think because he sort of just decides at that time to give up. When he seemed to have been fighting pretty fiercely up until that moment.
He's like, you know what? The planet's blowing apart. I'm done with life. I'll just stand here and take it.
But why? He had the opportunity to go with them.
Well, his physical condition,
Okay.
I think, was one thing. And then also seeing Jin again and kind of hoping that she would carry on the mission for him. Like, if there was no one else to continue on the mission, maybe he would have said, okay, that's it. I gotta go back to the rebels and report this. And I'll have to convince them to attack the Death Star.
Mm.
But since she was going, I think he was able to let go and die.
Yeah, like almost at peace in a way.
Yeah,
Like, oh, okay. I hope she handles this.
right.
It's in her hands.
I almost thought he was looking for a way out. And earlier he said, have you come to kill me? You know, he was thinking about death. He thought everyone was out to get him. Maybe he wanted to die.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's the sense that I got. He was running his rebel cell and doing stuff, but ultimately
No, he was active.
he
was.
I don't know. He was ready to be finished.
Ready
Too.
to retire.
Yeah.
Unplugged his breather. It's like die a man, not a robot thing.
Yep.
Did you guys expect everyone to die?
I didn't have an expectation, but I was surprised everyone did die. You know, you expect at least like someone to live on, but it makes sense because they're never brought up again in the movies that were in the future of this movie that are already made. So like it makes sense, or else you'd hear about that character.
Yeah. As soon as K2 died, I thought, oh, this is looking bad. You know, because the lovable droid.
Yeah.
You know, for him to get blasted apart.
That was sad.
That's not looking good for everyone else. And then, yeah, I think, I don't remember who was the next to die. Maybe
It was,
Chirrut was the next.
yeah.
And then Baze died shortly after that. And then Bodhi died as soon as he got the transmission out. It was sort of like everyone was able to accomplish their purpose.
Right.
K2 sealed them in the data storage vault and
Yeah.
kind of kept them safe. Chirrut hit the master switch. Baze took out all of the Death Troopers, so there was no one else to back up Krennic.
Well, and also too, it seemed like his purpose was just to protect Chirrut.
Yeah, I think so.
So like when Chirrut died, he's like that was his purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
He was like almost like his bodyguard, even though they're just like colleagues in
right.
the temple.
Yeah, Bodhi got out the message before he died. And then
Yeah, right before he died.
Then it's just Jin and Cassian
just Jin and Cassian, right? So,
who did their work and then died.
yeah.
I thought it was really cool when the rebel ships were pulling out
Mm-hmm.
and like 5 of them, like beamed out, and then Darth Vader's ship popped up and stopped the other ones and just started killing them.
Mm-hmm.
It was intense. I was like, damn, wish I was one of those first ships, like for whatever admiral, whatever his name is.
Radis, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of interesting how Tarkin said something about don't bother with the rebel fleet, target the base at Scarif. Or he says Vader will take care of the rebels, or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yes.
And I thought, oh, is Vader on the Death Star? Is Vader gonna come in his TIE fighter?
Mhm.
No. He's bringing the whole ship.
Yeah. It was funny too because he decided he wanted to blow up the base after he found out Krennic was there.
Yes.
He's like, get rid of that guy.
Yeah. He didn't say let's evacuate our troops there, or earlier he said I need to talk to Krennic. But once he actually got there, he's like, you know what? We don't need to talk.
Yeah.
That's fine. We'll just blow him up.
Right.
So, what would you guys want for Rogue 2? If they were to make another movie, I'm saying in this style. Obviously, this cast is all dead. You know what I'm saying?
Like, what would we want the plot to be?
Yeah, because, with the second Death Star, they talk about how they had to capture the plans, and many of our agents died to bring us this information and whatever. I would love to see another movie in this style, where it's not about the Skywalkers. It's kind of like a smaller scale movie. I mean, this is still a big movie,
Mm-hmm.
but a team of operatives who are maybe not like the most elite squad.
I would like them to expand on places in a way if it's like a story that's self-contained, that where like already destroyed, like in episode 7, like cantina or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And like those Republic planets that were blown up that you know nothing about, because like in the way that this movie increases the value of like that moment where like Leia has the data and she's giving it to R2D2,
Yeah.
and it like that feels more epic because you know what happened in this movie, what led up to it. Like that sort of thing would make like episode 7 feel more epic.
I agree. That's a really good idea. Yeah, because if you're going to take the time to kind of introduce new ideas or, new settings, at least make it relevant to the stuff that comes after, so then you're kind of building on that.
Either that or like it would be more complicated, but like a opposite perspective, like do an Empire focused story, like with a protagonist from the Empire, and it would be dark like this one because it would be the Empire. Because I wouldn't want them to do like a get the plans again, like it's just like a repeat.
It would be too similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe they should do a movie separate from Rey with like Finn and Poe and what goes on in the rebellion while she's, training.
So, like, do a parallel movie to episode 8? Or...
And somehow divide that movie in half or something. And give her own movie and give them their own movie.
Almost like branching paths.
Mm-hmm.
I heard that Disney's going to do over 10 years of Star Wars movies now. They've planned that out.
Holy crap.
Yeah. So there's a lot coming.
How many years like in between?
One a year.
One a year.
Is the plan for
so
10 years.
Star Wars movies?
That's what they said.
Dang.
That's what Bob Iger said. So. I know it may be too much.
That's risky.
It may be overdoing it.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so to kind of wrap up the Rogue One discussion,
Mm-hmm.
any final thoughts, or is that...
There's one thing. I thought it was interesting, and I wasn't paying close attention to it the entire time, but I noticed that in a lot of the movie, and especially in the action scenes, there wasn't music. Like, a lot of the action scenes, I felt like, maybe I'm remembering not so well, but like, it was like more silent. And it was like interesting because it was almost like portraying it like not in a glorified way. Like it was a little bit more like somber or like just violent rather than like exciting battle music. And it was made apparent to me because when the Cadillac ship pushed the Star Destroyer, what's
the
it
Corvette?
called? Whatever.
The Hammerhead Corvette.
The Cadillac.
Well, when the ship pushed oh gosh.
Star Destroyer. Learn the terminology.
That's not what I'm about. When it pushed the Star Destroyer into the other Star Destroyer, then music queued up. When it was like kind of cool, glorious music.
Uh-huh.
And it set contrast to prior to that when there was no music for a long time.
I don't know. I felt like there was a lot of music in this movie, like more than other Star Wars films.
The one scene I remember not having music, and I might be wrong about this, but it seemed like the music wasn't prominent, was on Jeddah, when they were stealing the Kyber crystals.
Yes.
Maybe that's the one you were thinking of? I don't know.
That's one of the scenes.
But that was very violent and very intense.
Mm-hmm.
And there wasn't any, like, uplifting or exciting music. It was kind of like, well, here it is. People are blowing each other up and fighting over this.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this is the only Star Wars movie that really made it feel like the rebellion, it was like guerrilla warfare. Like, they were like, it was like truly like militia, rather than like the rebellion is just like this equal force to the Empire. And maybe the Empire is a little bit stronger, but they're both like, they have huge ships and they have like fleets and stuff. Like, this was like with the, even though that was like Sol Guerrera's like people, it felt more like underground.
I still feel, you definitely get a sense of that in episodes 4, 5, and 6, though. That it's underground and they don't have the same technology and it is very guerrilla warfare. Especially in episode 6.
With the little furry guys?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think episode 6...
That was little chimpanzee warfare, not guerrilla. The little buddies. What are they called?
Ewoks.
Ewoks, yes.
Yeah, that scene, oh god.
Yeah, I think... I'm not a big fan of the Ewoks, personally.
They're so cute. They're like giant teddy bears.
They are cute, and I kind of like the idea, but the tone is weird.
It's strange, yeah. It's alien. But all I'm saying is that you do get that sense of guerrilla warfare from the rebellion in those movies.
I guess. I don't remember those as well.
So I would give this movie like a 9.5 out of 10. There's nothing that stood out where I would say, I'd prefer it was different.
I would probably give it an 8, but I have really high expectations for movies, first of all. Only because I do feel like it's kind of slow, and that the most exciting part for me is like the last 20 minutes, and I'm not quite as interested until the last 20 minutes of the movie.
Fair enough, yeah.
But it's an 8 out of 10 is really good.
Right.
It is a good movie.
Yeah. I would be around, I don't like scales, but like 8 to 9.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was great. It was probably my absolute favorite Star Wars movie out of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't have the nostalgia or like the, excitement about Ewoks to make one better than the other. But I thought it was really good.
I think I enjoyed this one more than I enjoyed The Force Awakens.
Same.
So.
Me too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's nice to have a self-contained story and development.
Mm-hmm.
Rey's a great character. Episode 7 is a great movie. But it's always asking you questions. Oh, where did Rey's parents go? You don't know about that yet. Come back next time.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. It's intriguing, but it leaves you waiting.
Mm-hmm.
I had no questions at the end of this movie.
Yeah.
It's like, nope, I know everything I need to know.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't set up a mystery of who is Chirrut's father, or like some nonsense to leave us hanging.
Mm-hmm.
It was very much open and shut.
It wasn't like Jin and Cassian escape to a far-off planet and have a baby. And
Right. They could have done that.
at the end, the baby's name is, I don't know, it cuts away. Like some stupid shit.
Yes.
The point is, it's not all that mysterious. But I agree. I like that it's a self-contained story, but still relates to the overall story arc of Star Wars.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much all there is to say.